Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Welcome to Strange Things, broadcasting from the Arkanasa Radio Studios in Laredo, Texas. And welcome to the show once again. I'm your host, Chris James. Tonight, we're going to be talking about haunted things. And funny, when I was putting this show together, I sat down on the couch for a few minutes just to watch a little TV, and what's on but a TV show called Haunted Things. I watched a few episodes, but not quite my cup of tea. Once more, you'll want to make a note on your calendar. September 30th, 2018. Ricardo Rodriguez will be taking on the Laredo Kid. 820 Gale Street here in Laredo, Texas. That will be the Iron Body Gym, right behind the Texas Discount Furniture Warehouse. The first match will be at 6:30, so get there in time to enjoy some of the food they'll be having on site. It's only $10 at the gate, and kids get in for $3. Come on down and cheer on your favorite, or just enjoy the evening. That's Sunday, September 30th at 820 Gale Street here in Laredo. We've all heard of haunted houses, haunted places even. But how about things that seem to be haunted that don't make any sense? Well, things like furniture, toys. How about haunted vehicles? Let's take a look at a few of these. I have some relatives who lived in Anahuac, Texas, which is over near Baytown. It was a small town today, only has 2,200 people living there. Back in the 60s, there were even less. My mother's aunt began asking everyone who was up stomping around the house at night. She kept saying someone was making noise all night, and she wanted the guilty party to fess up. This was an old house, the kind that's set up on pillars. It's called a pier and beam. There's a crawl space underneath that's just big enough to literally crawl through. The floor was hardwood, and any movement across the floor would make some noise. My mother's uncle and the kids all claimed it wasn't them. This only got the mother to try harder to find the guilty party and get them to admit it. The family began to worry she was losing her mind, or perhaps she was having a few too many just before bedtime. Her husband tried to reason with her, but this only made her even madder. Things got a little tense amongst the household. The accusations continued that someone was up all hours of the night making noise, and she wanted it to stop. After having decided the old lady was nuts and there wasn't anything to be done about it, the people just began to ignore her. Then, one day, as the uncle sat in his chair reading the newspaper, he heard the very distinct sound of someone walking across the floor right in front of him. The footsteps stopped in front of him, so he lowered the paper to see who it was. There was no one there. Now, everyone became aware of someone, or more than likely something, moving around the house. In an effort to find out what was making all this racket, they tried looking at everything in the house. Not the heater. It was a gas wall-mounted unit that barely heated anything. Not the AC. They didn't have any. When every possibility had been eliminated, they were left with only one thing. It had to be paranormal. Something had gotten into the house uninvited. They thought about what they had done that might have brought a spirit into their home. The kids were not playing with a Ouija board. They didn't have any kind of a cursed item that they could figure out. They thought long and hard about it, and then it dawned on them. They had bought an old sideboard at an auction. It was kind of old and looked a little bit like an antique. It was in good shape. They went to the auctioneer to ask about who had owned the sideboard before them. The auctioneer said an old lady, the kind with a really bad reputation, had died and the county sold her possessions to pay for her funeral. Well, the family dragged the sideboard out the door and left it on the side of the road to be hauled away come trash day. They never heard the disembodied footsteps after that day. In the book, The Laredo Paranormal Research Society, I tell about the Hillside Dollhouse. The LPRS team was contacted by a concerned homeowner about possibly conducting an investigation in her home because of unexplained sounds and events which she had noticed at night. She said, "I contacted you. Why don't you come? My dolls move around by themselves and I want you to film them." Well, Ishmael asked, "Is there a problem? Do you need your house blessed or something done about it?" To this, the woman answered, "Oh no, I don't want anything done about them. I love them. I just want you to see what's going on and film them. Then you can keep the film." After meeting with the homeowner, it was discovered that she was a long-time collector of antique dolls and curiosities, some of which dated back to the 1800s. The investigative process was explained to her, and she was assured that the LPRS team would make every effort to determine the cause of the bumps in the night she had been experiencing for years. After the homeowner had been filled in on all the investigation process, the LPRS members began setting up their equipment. At that point, the extent of her collection was finally realized. In just one room of the hillside home, there were over 100 dolls. Some of these dolls were old antiques made of porcelain. Others were plastic from both the turn of the century and the mid-century. Ishmael said, "The entire home was inspected, but this one room in particular was selected for meticulous attention because of the way it made the hair on the back of our necks stand up, and because we knew that often old spirits or souls linger in objects of affection, especially objects that gave us emotional comfort. For example, a doll given to a child as a sense of security after a traumatic event. It becomes often we project the energy from our souls into these familiar objects, especially when we're children." All the extensive LPRS resources and equipment were brought to bear on this one investigation because of the physical and emotional reactions felt when this room was entered. For 3 nights, infrared and thermal imaging cameras and audio sound gathering equipment was set to collect evidence. After studying over 40 hours of evidence, a major break in the case was discovered when one of the antique dolls moved. This doll was located on a bed, surrounded by other children's dolls, in a standing position. The eyes of the doll eerily blinked repeatedly without any cause. Viewing the evidence was spine-tingling. Watching the doll as it opened and closed its left eye is disturbing. I watched the recording several times and it was just creepy. A follow-up investigation was conducted and this doll to study the phenomena. The doll in question is hard plastic, turn-of-the-century replica of an infant dressed in an outfit which looked like a white lacy baptism dress with a head cap and a hood. After interviewing the homeowner, it was learned that the antique doll had been purchased in Youngstown, Ohio, many years ago. The doll was investigated and studied by the LPRS team, and it was learned that it was the type of doll whose eyes worked on a counterweight or a balance system, which closed the eyes when the doll was laid flat, as if the child was putting it to sleep at night, and it would open its eyes if the child picked it up to play with it. Numerous air pressure tests as well as motion tests were conducted to determine if the phenomena was caused by an environmental physical reaction, but they concluded there were no results. However, beyond the negative results from these physical tests, certain other reactions were attained from the experienced medium, who reported strong physical and emotional energy reactions when examining this doll. In particular, it was truly hard to look into those cold, dark, empty eyes, especially because everyone knew it just might unexpectedly react to their gaze. The LPRS felt this object should be shared with the public, and they requested permission from the owner for a public viewing. When the doll was placed in a glass display case at a local public exhibit, two unexplained events occurred in front of numerous people. The lights all dimmed by themselves, and the fire alarm detection sensor light above the display turned on. A check of the fire alarm panel system indicated this was the only activation in the entire building, and an interview of the caretaker revealed that this truly was unusual because it had never happened before. Many places and objects have been investigated and studied during the years, but this doll is special in a different manner because of the way it interacts with people and the environment. Ishmael said the fact that it is a child's plaything and the thought of having a child unknowingly play with it brings chills to me. This object and its significance caused us worry, given the level of experience that the LPRS investigators possess and the way it makes us feel when we're in its presence. I know exactly what he's talking. Anytime I'm near that doll, it just feels weird. The physical and emotional reactions from the team, as well as the response from their equipment, combined with the evidence that had been gathered through the 3 nights of investigation, compelled the LPRS to share this paranormal phenomena with the public as a real-life example of what may be causing mysterious and unexplained sounds in the middle of the night that people have heard and reported. Ishmael went on to say, this doll caused such a reaction to both himself and their medium and equipment that even after years of investigations in really dark, spooky places, I could not bring myself to invite this object into my home after it was generously loaned to us by its owner for display. The doll spent the night in the back seat of his vehicle. And now for a little update. Once Ishmael was loaned the doll for an extended time, he was keeping it inside his house until their next public event. When he went to retrieve it, the doll wasn't where he'd left it. He had to search for the doll all over the house. Each time Ishmael put the doll away, it would turn up in a different location. It got to the point he bought a plexiglass box with a lock on it. And now the doll is kept locked away between shows. It hasn't escaped yet. I don't like dolls. It all stems from the night my brother and I watched the episode of Night Gallery called The Doll. It was Season 1, Episode number 15. A British officer returns from India to find his niece has been given a hideous doll that looks like something out of a, well, scary TV show. The girl tells her uncle that the doll tells her things at night. And then, throughout the show, the doll starts showing up in places that it shouldn't be. The British officer and the doll have a confrontation that ends in his death. The final scene is of a man in India receiving a package that contains a doll that looks exactly like the British officer. The doll opens its eyes, and that was the end of the show. Nope, don't like dolls. There's a doll in Florida that really takes the cake. The doll is named Robert. The doll originally belonged to Robert Eugene Odo, who received it sometime around 1904. The doll either came from Germany or a servant from the Bahamas, depending on which story you read. The two become inseparable. Robert began to refer to the doll as being Robert, and he wanted to be called by his middle name, Eugene. Robert the doll was given his own chair to sit on and had an outfit made that looked just like the one Eugene wore. The doll would go anywhere Eugene went. Since the family had money, most folks chose to ignore anything odd this boy did. Any time Eugene was caught misbehaving, he would blame Robert as the cause. The doll had told him to do it, or it was Robert's fault that something got broken. Late at night, his family would hear a conversation going on. It sounded like two people talking, when they knew it was just their son and his doll. When Eugene grew older, he still kept the doll close. This was written off as being one of his eccentricities, seeing as Eugene was working on becoming an artist. When Eugene went away to study in New York and then Paris, he was convinced to leave Robert at home. The doll was left sitting in its chair, waiting for Eugene to return. While in Paris, Eugene met Annette Parker. They fell in love and got married. On May 30th, 1930, once their studies were finished, they moved back to Florida and took possession of the house at 534 Eaton Street in Key West. There, Eugene was reunited with his favorite thing, Robert. Eugene wanted to keep the doll in the bedroom, but Annette didn't like the doll. It was looking a bit ragged, and she felt a bit jealous of the way Eugene treated this inanimate object. So Robert was consigned to the attic. This was no dusty old storage space, but a mostly finished room. Robert was placed in his chair, sitting by a window that looked down on the street. The room was furnished with all the toy furniture Eugene had for his friend. And people walking by began to say it looked like the doll moved. They would look up, and the window would be empty. Then a second later, Robert would be there staring at them. Sometimes it looked as if the doll was in another position. Late at night, when it should have been pitch black in the attic, it looked as if there was some form of light showing, which made Robert visible. Robert Eugene Odo died in 1974. His wife died 2 years later. Robert the doll was left in the attic, even after the house was sold to Myrtle Reuter. Robert stayed in the attic, making people nervous who saw him from the street. Sometimes late at night, people would hear someone walking around in the attic. A man doing some work at the house saw the doll sitting in its chair. Then the man heard the sound of giggling, and when he turned and looked, Robert was gone. A reporter visited the attic after hearing about Robert. The reporter said the doll looked as if it were sad that so many people were in his room. When someone said Eugene had been some kind of a nut to keep the doll, it looked like the facial expression now changed to anger. Myrtle Reuter kept Robert with her even when she moved to a different home. She kept Robert up until 1994, when she donated him to the East Martello Museum. Robert sits in his chair and looks like any old doll. However, the people who have stood in front of the doll and watched say it looks as if he's moved. Some say its facial expression changes. People hear laughter coming from the case where Robert is kept. The folks try to take a picture of the doll, only to find their cameras had malfunctioned. If you want a photograph, you have to ask permission first. Then your camera will work if Robert wants it to. Some folks think this is all just nonsense. They go up to the display case and they say things like, "I don't think you're real." Later, these people will have an accident or some form of misfortune. The museum is constantly receiving letters from people addressed to Robert, asking him to forgive them for whatever slight they may have given to the doll. People swear their lives changed for the worse after disrespecting Robert. There have been car accidents, health issues, job losses, just about any misfortune imaginable blamed on not showing Robert the proper amount of respect. If you've ever watched Ozzy and Jack's World Detour starring Ozzy Osbourne and his son Jack, you might have seen the episode where Ozzy passed gas in front of Robert the doll. Jack, being very superstitious, insisted that Ozzy apologize. Later, they had a blowout on their RV. It might have been just a bad tire or the way Jack drives. Or it might have been Robert showing his displeasure at being fumigated. Jack used to have his own TV show called Haunted Highways, which was about investigating paranormal sites all across the country. I used to watch it, and it was pretty neat. That was my kind of show. Annabelle is another doll I can do without. Unlike the movie, Annabelle is actually a Raggedy Ann doll. To look at it, you'd never think haunted doll. It doesn't look scary, not even a little bit. Back in the early 70s, the doll was given as a birthday present to Donna, who was a student nurse. Her mother bought the doll, new, and gave it to the 28-year-old as a present. There are a few sites that say this happened in 1968, but the style of dress the doll came in didn't show up until the 70s. Donna shared an apartment with another nursing student named Angie. The doll was just a decoration. Donna would make her bed and set the doll against the pillows and then leave. She'd come home and find the doll in a slightly different position. Nothing odd. Donna would easily convince herself she had placed the doll differently than she'd thought. Maybe she'd actually put it at the foot of the bed without thinking. On a few occasions, the doll would be sitting next to the pillows, but its arms and legs would be crossed. Donna never posed the doll. She just set it down with the arms by its side and the legs stretched out in front. As time went on, the placement of the doll became harder to reason. The doll would be sitting on the dresser when Donna was sure she'd always put it on the bed. She began to think Angie was messing with her. When asked, Angie said no, she wasn't moving the doll around. One day, after coming home from class, they found the doll in the living room. On another occasion, it was standing, leaned up against a chair. The doll is just cloth with stuffing. There's no way the two girls could get the doll to stand on its feet, no matter what they tried. Another time they found it in a room with the door closed that they both knew they'd left open. Then they found it kneeling on a chair. Once more, this pose was unmanageable with a cloth doll. This was getting to be too much to handle. Then things took a whole new twist. Donna came home to find a penciled message written in childlike hand that said, "I missed you." It was written on parchment paper. Donna looked all throughout the apartment, but she knew they didn't have any parchment paper there. Where did the doll get this paper, and how was it able to write? Donna then found blood on the doll's hands. Not knowing who to turn to, Donna enlisted the help of a psychic medium to hold a seance in order to find out what was going on. The medium contacted the spirit that was possessing the doll. It said she was Annabelle, a 7-year-old girl who used to play in the field where Donna and Angie's apartment complex now stood. Annabelle's lifeless body had been found in the field, but no one was ever convicted of the crime. Donna and Angie thought it would be the right thing to permit the spirit of Annabelle to stay with them and continue to possess the doll. Lou was Angie's fiancé. He'd been staying with them since the doll had arrived. Lou didn't like the doll, and he told Donna that he thought it was evil. One night, Lou awoke, suddenly, unable to move. He saw the Annabelle doll at his feet. He watched as it slowly moved up his leg and onto his chest. The doll moved up his chest until it was right by his chin, and then it began to strangle him with its cloth hands. He struggled, but he couldn't move. He awoke the next morning, convinced the doll had tried to kill him. He knew that this had not been a dream. On another occasion, Lou heard something moving around in Donna's room. He opened the door and saw the doll was sitting on the floor by the bed. As Lou walked towards the doll, a sound startled him, and he turned to look behind him. When he looked back, the doll was no longer where he had seen it. Lou felt an odd burning sensation on his chest. He opened his shirt and found 7 scratches across his skin. Donna began to realize that the spirit might not be that of an innocent 7-year-old, but perhaps it was something far worse. She contacted an Episcopal priest who got in touch with the paranormal researchers Ed and Lorraine Warren. The Warrens told the priest it was time to perform an exorcism on the apartment. Donna decided the doll was a menace, and she asked the Warrens to take the Raggedy Ann doll with them. It has been in their possession ever since. Annabelle is now located in Ed and Lorraine Warren's Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. There's a great big sign that says, "Warning, positively do not open," across the door of her case. Well, how about a haunted car? James Dean bought a Porsche 550S, which was affectionately nicknamed Little Bastard, number 130. The VIN was 550-005. For those of you who call it a VIN number, you're being redundant. VIN stands for Vehicle Identification Number. So when you say VIN number, you're actually saying Vehicle Identification Number. Stop it. When James Dean's close friend Alec Guinness saw the car for the first time, he said the car had a sinister appearance. He then told Dean, "If you get in that car, you will be found dead in it by this time next week." Alec Guinness is best known as Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars. While serving in the Royal British Navy, Guinness had a premonition of drowning at sea. He never claimed to be psychic, but he always took steps to follow his visions. Alex said he saw a ghost while in Bangalore filming a passage to India. Dean didn't listen to his friend and laughed about his ideas because James was a very good driver and felt he could handle any car. On September 30th, 1955, as he drove to a road race in Salinas, California, an oncoming driver turned onto 41 from 466 right in Dean's path. Dean tried to maneuver around the car, but he lost traction. The two cars hit head-on. The Spider, being a lighter vehicle, flipped and cartwheeled down the road and into a ditch. James Dean was 24 years old and had only made 3 movies. The car was hauled away to a garage. When the car was being offloaded at the Barris garage, it slipped and crushed a mechanic's leg. The parts of it were still in good shape, so in an effort to make a few bucks, these parts were sold. 2 doctors, Troy McHenry and William Eskrid, bought some of these parts to use in their own race cars. On October 2nd, 1956, McHenry lost control, hit a tree, and died. The used parts were blamed for his death. Eskrid's car rolled over and he suffered multiple injuries. Not everyone bothered to buy parts. A man decided he wanted the steering wheel. One night he snuck into the garage and tried to pull the steering wheel off. His arm was sliced open on a piece of metal he didn't see. Another souvenir hunter tried to remove the blood-soaked seat covers. He was seriously injured for his efforts as well. In an effort to stop people getting killed in car accidents, Barris decided to put the car on display so people would see what going too fast might do to you. The car slipped from its display and broke a kid's pelvis. When the car was being stored in a garage in Fresno, California, the garage caught fire. Everything was destroyed in the building, except for the little bastard. It came out unscathed by the fire with only some minor smoke damage. While being transferred from one place to another, the flatbed truck driver lost control of his truck. The driver was thrown from his cab, and then the car broke loose and fell on top of him, killing him. A truly weird accident. 2 years later, the car fell from another truck, causing another accident. 1958, the car was once more on the bed of a flatbed truck. The truck was parked on a hill. The brakes gave out, and the truck, along with the car, rolled down the hill and crashed into another vehicle. Fortunately, no one was in it at the time. James Dean's car was sent to New Orleans. While it was being displayed there, the car fell apart, literally. It crashed to the floor in several pieces. The bits and pieces were collected to be shipped back to California garage. While en route, the car vanished. It left New Orleans in many pieces, but none of them ever arrived. There is $1 million reward for the car. Several people have come forward with information as to its whereabouts. Not a one has laid hands on the money. They can only give sketchy details about having seen the car at some time in the past, but they can't say where it is today. We're going to take a very brief pause here, play a couple of commercials. We'll be right back after this, so don't go away. You're listening to Arkanasa Radio. Did you hear a bump in the night and you think it just might be a ghost? Contact the Laredo Paranormal Research Society at laredoparanormal@hotmail.com. That's the LPRS for all your otherworldly needs. Did you go out UFO hunting and couldn't focus on the sky? Swing on by Del Norte Optical, 107 Calle Del Norte, right across from the Embassy Suites. That's not a weather balloon, that's a flying saucer. Back in 1776, someone said, "Give me coffee or give me death." And if that's how you feel, you should be at the Organic Man Coffee Truck. They make coffee the right way, one delicious cup at a time. 4501 McPherson, Suite number 9. Coffee, the stuff dreams are made of. Makeup isn't something you want to just smear on and hope for the best. You might come out looking like Lon Chaney. Call Lourdes James, independent beauty consultant, and get a free makeover to see how makeup should be done. 956-723-3019. This is Arkanasa Radio you've been listening to. And welcome back to the show. If you read the book or saw the movie Christine, I was surprised to discover that it was actually based on an actual vehicle. A 1964 Dodge 330 Limited Edition, which was called the Golden Eagle, is also known as the most evil car in America. The Dodge was originally purchased as a police car for Old Orchard Beach, Maine. The car was dressed out as a police cruiser and put to work fighting crime. Well, at least giving out traffic tickets and going to the donut shop. The first officer, who was assigned to drive the unit, wound up killing his family before turning the gun on himself. Since this happened off duty, the unit was passed to another officer. The second officer killed his family and himself. This was written off as simply a coincidence. There's just no way the two murder-suicides could have been related. A third officer was assigned the unit as his mobile office. At the end of one shift, the officer went home, killed his family and himself as well. Nobody at the police station was willing to say that the three murder-suicides were connected. They also didn't want to say there was any connection to the police car they'd been driving. And nobody wanted to drive that car anymore. The car was taken out of service and sold. The family that bought the car didn't have any problems with it. Well, no problems as far as being driven, literally, to kill anyone. The car did have a weird thing about the doors popping open as they drove down the highway. And nobody fell out, but they did feel very uneasy about it. The seat belts weren't first issued until 1964, and they were only on the front seat. The car was parked at the curb when a young boy was struck and killed by a passing vehicle. His body was flung through the air, and it landed up under the front bumper of the Golden Eagle. 20 years later, another boy was struck and killed by a passing truck. His body bounced off the front bumper of the truck that hit him and landed square on the hood of the Golden Eagle. Even though the car was parked both times, the deaths were both blamed on the '64 Dodge. In 1980, a group of zealots from the local church took it upon themselves to attack the car. They smashed some of the windows and dented some of the side panels. The guy who led the attack later died in a car crash when his vehicle was T-boned by an 18-wheeler. He literally lost his head. If at first you don't succeed, in 1990 a second group of overly inspired zealots tried a second assault on the car. Once again they broke a few windows and scratched what little paint there was in their endeavor to drive the devil from this hunk of Detroit steel. Later that week, the second leader died in a car crash, just like his predecessor. I guess they didn't learn from the first assault. In 2010, a third church group, inspired by the first two bunches of hooligans, stole the car and dismantled it. The parts were then distributed amongst several junkyards in an attempt to deny the devil, or whichever spirit it was inhabiting the Dodge, a home. Well, the owners managed to track down most of the pieces and return them to the family property. Today, the car is in hiding all over their farm. My wife collects rocks. Anytime someone is going to some exotic location or any place we've never been, my wife will ask them to bring her a rock. The funny thing is, she can tell you where each and every rock came from. If we're visiting a place, she'll look around until she spots a rock that catches her eye, and she'll bring it home as a souvenir. On one trip, we were staying in a cabin in Medina, Texas. We had our niece and a few nephews with us. One of them left the front door open just a crack. A huge snowshoe cat, that's a cross between a Siamese and a Shorthair, pushed the door open and made himself at home. He was a huge cat. As we were about to leave, the owners of the cabin invited us to take the cat with us, and so we did. Instead of a rock as a souvenir, we took a cat and we named him Rocky. We found him at the Medina High Point Campground August 14th, 2015. He died from liver failure on August 14th, 2017, exactly 2 years later. All of my books dealing with the bogus anomalous group have Rocky on the cover. The only time my wife will not ask for a rock to be brought from afar is if the travelers are going to Hawaii. Mount Pelée has a bad reputation when it comes to taking away rocks. Just about any time a visitor removes a piece of the mountain, they are visited by some of the worst luck imaginable. People have had car accidents, job losses, divorces, illnesses, and a few deaths, all associated with having removed a rock from the volcano. Each year, the park receives hundreds of rocks in the mail from visitors who wish to return their memento and remove whatever curse or bad thing that followed them away from the mountain. Could the spirit of Pele be inhabiting all of her parts and haunting the rocks that have been taken from her? As soon as the rocks are returned to their source, the bad luck seems to go away. Books. I love books. I have bought a few hundred, and I have sold or given away a few hundred as well. I've even written a few books of my own. Books hold a special place in a lot of people's hearts. I never go anywhere without a book along just in case. I'm not as bad as Brick Heck, but I might be close. There are stories of books being haunted. Some spirit or ghost has become attached to the pages and resides there. I heard a story about a haunted Bible. The Bible had belonged to a family's grandmother. She was holding it the day she died. After the funeral, the Bible was placed on a shelf, and no one was to touch it. The woman's daughter believed her grandmother's spirit had gone into the Bible at the time of her death. From that day on, any time a family member died, the Bible would be found laying on the floor, open to a specific passage. In the hills of the Appalachians, family Bibles are haunted by their previous owners and must be buried with the deceased. These books are not to be kept or passed on from generation to generation. The book of the Sacred Magic of Bremelin, the Mage, which was edited by S. Liddell MacGregor Mathers, was said to be cursed or haunted. Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers was a British occultist. He is primarily known as one of the founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a ceremonial magic order of which offshoots still exist today. Those who had a copy of the book of the sacred magic in their possession are still to this day said to be haunted by its power. This interesting manuscript was published in 1898, and a second edition was published in 1900 by J. M. Watkins of London. Aleister Crowley also considered it of great importance and underwent the operation described within it, and often noted to others that the copy he owned was haunted by the spirit. Hence, he deemed the book printed at the time possessed by an unseen power. The operation wasn't some medical treatment, but a ceremonial endeavor. This is described as an elaborate ritual whose purpose is to obtain the knowledge and conversation of the magician's guardian angel, or guardian something. The preparations are elaborate, difficult, and long. In the German text, all describe the operation as taking no less than 18 months before any divine contact is accomplished. In Mather's translation, the initial phase of preparation before the contact lasts only 6 months. He either cut some corners or he was in a hurry. During the period of preparation, the magician must pray before sunrise and again at sunset. During this preparatory phase, there are many restrictions. No fooling around with either sex, no alcoholic beverages, and the magician must conduct all of his business dealings in a scrupulous and fair manner. After the preparatory phase has been successfully completed, the magician's holy guardian angel will appear to him and reveal magical secrets. Once this has been accomplished, the magician must invoke the 12 kings and dukes of hell and bind them. I imagine this involves a pentagram or maybe some salt. The magician gains command over these beings inside his own mental universe. He also removes their negative influence on his life. These spirits will deliver a number of familiar spirits that will stay with the mage and help him do his bidding. So this isn't just a haunted book, but a set of haunted books. Believe it or not, you can get a copy from Amazon for just $29.52, but be careful, it is probably haunted. Back in the 1600s, in a northern Italy village of Napoli, a young bride was given a special wedding present. Oddly, the present was given the day before the wedding. This may have been how things were done back then. The bride was overjoyed with the gift. It was a silver vase, handmade by one of the best artisans in all of Italy, or at least that's what she was told. The description of this artifact are sketchy at best. It is hand-tooled silver and ornately engraved. It stood about 12 inches tall and it weighed about 4 pounds. The next morning the bride was found dead, or dying depending on the story. She was holding the vase in her arms and said she cursed whoever took the vase from her. And she was murdered by some unknown scoundrel. The vase became known as the Bassano vase. The word Bassano might have come from the Greek word bassanos, which means either torment, torments, or great pain. The word is found 3 times in the New Testament. The vase was passed on to the next of kin. There's nothing saying what the relative did with the vase, but soon this relative was found dead as well. Being made from pure silver, the vase was worth a lot of money. The family kept the vase, and the next relative to take possession also died from some unknown and unexplained illness. As each member of the family took the vase home, soon that person would be dead. The vase wound up being hidden away in the attic since it was too valuable to be thrown away, but nobody in the family was willing to take it as their own. Legend says there was a piece of parchment inside the vase stating that the vase was cursed and anyone who possessed it would die. A family member found the vase in the attic and decided he would sell it. The paper was removed so that no potential buyer would be dissuaded from handing over their money. Once more, the purchaser was found dead a short time later. The vase became well known amongst the community. With so many people suddenly falling over dead, all because of the Bassano vase, it became difficult for anyone to even want to look at the thing, let alone buy it. I could find no reason why the vase would be given a Greek name since its entire history was in Italy. When nobody decided what to do with the cursed vase, it was taken to the local priest who buried it in the church graveyard. Sometime around 1988, the vase was dug up. A doctor was told that this was the Bassano vase and it was dangerous. He said this is all just superstitious nonsense, and he took the vase home. He died just a few weeks later. The vase was moved from one disbeliever to another, with each one being found dead shortly after they received it. An archaeologist purchased it for 5 million lira, which is about $3,000 in U.S. money, for his own private collection, saying it was a valuable art piece from the Renaissance. 3 months later, he died of an unknown infection. The family decided to sell the fancy vase. They did find a buyer, but it was nowhere the original cost. This buyer was found dead as well. Well, this time the family of the deceased threw the vase out a window, nearly killing a man on the street. The police who arrived at the scene tried to return the vase, but the family refused to take it, saying they'd rather pay a fine for throwing it at the man than to take the vase back. The story goes that the police, not knowing what to do with the vase, had it buried in some unknown location. The Dybbuk box, or Dybbuk, is a wine cabinet which is said to be haunted by a Dybbuk. A Dybbuk is a restless, malicious spirit that is able to haunt and even possess the living. This particular box gained notoriety when it was auctioned on eBay with an accompanying horror story written by Kevin Mannis, and is the original inspiration for the 2012 film The Possession. If you should decide to burn a container holding a Dybbuk, the box will take a long time to burn, but as it is slowly being consumed, the Dybbuk will be released from its confinement, and then it cannot be returned to the box. Kind of like that box Pandora had. The term Dybbuk box was first used by Kevin Mannis to describe the wine cabinet he had bought from an antiques dealer. The box intrigued him, and so he tried to find out its history. The box had been in Spain during World War II. A Jewish woman who was running from the Nazis and made her way into Spain bought the box from some unknown store. She then immigrated to the United States. The woman kept the box in her sewing room, but never allowed anyone to open it. She told her children that the Dybbuk was imprisoned inside and they should never let it out. Mannis offered to give the box back to the family since it was an heirloom, but the entire family said they didn't want it. Mannis had already looked inside. The box contained 2 1920 pennies, a lock of blonde hair tied tight with a cord, a lock of blackish brown hair also tied with cord. There was a small statue engraved with the Hebrew word shalom. A shalom is a Hebrew word meaning either peace, harmony, completeness, prosperity, and welfare. It can also be used to say hello or goodbye. The box held a small golden wine goblet, 1 dried rosebud, and a single candle holder with 4 octopus-shaped legs. Mannis said that he experienced a series of horrific nightmares while he was in possession of the box, or when other people stayed at his house, they had some really first-class nightmares as well. Mannis gave the box to his mother as a birthday present, and she had a heart attack that night. This was when he decided to sell the box. Let somebody else have all this fun. The person that bought the Dybbuk box said they had a strong odor of cat pee all around it. That night, everybody in the house had really bad dreams involving an old hag that is trying to kill them. The family decided they also wanted to be done with this box, so they sold it to the next victim. The next owner developed hives all over his body, and he began to cough up blood. This owner didn't even think to pass this haunted box on to some other poor soul. Instead, he consulted with a rabbi. They had the box sealed away and hidden in some undisclosed location. When the secret location was no longer that secret, the box was donated to Zach Bagans of Ghost Adventures, who now displays it in his museum. So, you see, it's not just haunted houses you have to avoid, but haunted everything. I never got to haunted ships or haunted trains or haunted ice cream trucks. Maybe on a later show. If you like tonight's show, tell your friends so they can listen in too. If you didn't like it, nobody wants to hear from you. If you'd like to visit the archives, you'll find them at You'll find the archives at strangethings.podomatic.com. And if you'd like to write to me and suggest a show or make a comment, you can get a hold of me at strangethings dot, there I go again, strangethings at arkanasa.com. Till next week, this is Chris James.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man, they say murder 3? Strange things that happen here, how stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?